Before we give you the chair of the conference for his remarks, let me just mention that we will entertain one question and one follow-up question. And please state your name and the agency you're affiliated with. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, may I now give you the Secretary of the Department of Transportation and Communication of the Republic of the Philippines, Secretary Emilio Abaya. Sir.
Well, our friends from media, Your Excellencies, a pleasant evening to all. I thank you for coming to the press conference for the 9th Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Transportation Ministerial Meeting, or APEC TMMM 9. We have invited you tonight so that we may share what has transpired during the Transport Ministerial meeting. After this, we will have an open forum that will allow you to ask questions relevant to the meeting. Overall, I must say that we, the ministers, heads of delegations, and the delegates of the 20 economies had a pleasant and productive series of discussions, presentations, and exchange of information on topics aligned with the theme driving economic growth through inclusive mobility and sustainable transportation systems. Among the topics we tackled were advancing inclusive mobility, developing sustainable transportation systems, which encompasses the enhancement of transportation safety and security, investing in resilient infrastructure, and the promotion of green technology, and encouraging innovation in transportation systems, which includes studying disruptive technologies, big data applications, and their limitations in the transportation sector, and the use of intelligent transport systems to improve efficiency and effectiveness. The agreements reached by the ministers are reflected in the joint ministerial statement, which will be distributed to you after this press conference. So our friends from media, thank you for being here, and we're now open for any questions and clarifications. Thank you.
We'll now entertain questions. Please.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Mads Miraflor of Manila Bulletin. It was mentioned earlier that the Philippines is pushing for APEC Inclusive Mobility Framework. Can you provide more details on that? Thank you.
Well, basically, the inclusive mobility framework espoused by the Philippines is now covered under the joint ministerial statement. The joint ministerial statement is now going to be a roadmap for APEC to be worked on for the next 2 years. Essentially, it is including those who are less privileged in society, those who have less access to transportation systems, and namely these would be the sectors for the disabled, for women, for children, for the elderly, and basically having them, giving them access to efficient and safe transportation systems, because we do believe mobility allows a person, an economy, to maximize their potential as a human being and likewise as a society. So that in itself is what covers the inclusive mobility aspect of what we discussed for today.
Sorry, just a follow-up. Will this be endorsed in the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting in November, and will this eventually be carried out in Peru for the next summit? Thank you.
Well, definitely it is part of our joint ministerial statement. Probably I could call on Dr. Bollard to explain how a transport minister's joint ministerial statement eventually get to become an integral part of the economic leaders' direction. So, Dr. Bollard.
Thank you. Well, of course, the Philippines has an overarching theme right across APEC for this year called Inclusive Economy, and this is the transport minister's contribution to this. So it's right in the center of what the Philippines is trying to achieve this year. Transport ministers have endorsed this, so it now will go forward to leaders in Manila, and they'll note it in their statement, I expect, but we still got to wait for leaders on that. But this is a multi-year thing. It will be picked up by Peru if leaders direct that next year, but it wouldn't just be a single year. It will go on out to the future for some time.
Questions? Please.
Good evening. I'm Chris Muda from Philippines News Agency. Sir, what are those mass transport-related initiatives or strategies or best practices that you have tackled during the discussions and that are relative to the Philippines and we can adopt? Thank you.
Well, essentially, we started with inclusive mobility. Then we went on to sustainable transportation systems. And this, and not only the Philippines, in fact, a lot of APEC economies are undertaking similar efforts to have both inclusive and sustainable transportation systems. Likewise, improvement in terms of connectivity, tapping innovation and technology. We've had a very lively discussion on disruptive technologies. There were likewise the balance between technology and regulation. Likewise, a discussion on how to address traffic, and likewise how eventually technology will play its role in bringing in accessibility and mobility to various economies. Feel free to ask other ministers, and they're
The gentleman at the back, please.
also here to address your concerns.
Good evening. I'm Angel Samonte from the Presidential News Desk. To Secretary Abaya. Sir, can you expound on the Green Port Award system?
I think a presentation was made by Chinese Taipei. Probably I could request His Excellency from Chinese Taipei to explain the Green Port system.
首先，我要跟各位说明，那么在绿客港口这一部分，中华台北事实上，那么已经在欧洲的这个协会里头，那么取得了相关的认证。那当然这中间里头有很多的相关的作为，例如说岸电设施的采取，那么船舶排污的这种规定，那么都要符合相关的法令的规定。那此外呢，当然排碳、排污，那么还有相关需要的监测的设施，也非得要那么完全符合国际的规范不可。所以最起码这一部分，那么在中华台北已经跨出了一步。那我们当然期待未来，那么除了中华台北的那么相关的港口，高雄港已经取得欧洲港的这个认证以外，其他的港府同样的也取得相关的认证。那我们期待在认证的过程里头，也可以培养我们同仁的这个能力。那么透过这样能力的培养，使台湾的整个港群，那么中华台北的整个港群，那么可以达到国际的水准。我想简单的做这样一个说明。
Actually, the port of Kaohsiung in Chinese Taipei has been credited as the European Seaports Organization as one of the eco port, and that's the first one in Asia. And then in order to obtain the certification, we have to follow certain rules, the international norms, and then also we have to inspect and then strictly the pollutants of vessels, and then we have to install a really effective inspection system, and then so that all the ports can be following the international standards. And then that's what we as Chinese Taipei is working on. And then hopefully in the future, not just the port of Kaohsiung, but also other ports in Chinese Taipei can be crowned as such honor. And then I think in the process of obtaining the certification, it is also a process for the capability building for our port staff. And I'm proud to say that Chinese Taipei is doing pretty well in this aspect.
George from
George Bandola, People's Television. Sir, how would you rate the amount of investment in the transportation sector in the Asia-Pacific region? And in general, also, if we could ask these representatives, what are those conflicting or restrictive policies that hinder continued investment in the transport sector?
Well, clearly, what was presented today, there is still a lack of investment in transportation. A figure that floated a while ago, we're in the trillion of dollars because the economies continue to grow, populations continue to grow. Even the advanced economies of the APEC member countries should continue to invest in transportation and mass transit system. So there was a discussion on available financing, on how financial institutions are around, ready to assist various economies to fill in the gaps in terms of investment. Because clearly there's some economies that couldn't do it on their own. Thus, there's much space for public-private partnerships where private sector would play a critical role in national development. And again, the need for infrastructure is present in both advanced economies and developing economies. As to regulation, clearly in our dialogue this morning, especially with the CEOs of various companies operating in the APEC region, understandably, from the private sector, they would say there should be less regulation. But clearly, government is there to regulate in order to put order into things, to follow so that rules are clear, and likewise to ensure that public interest is always protected but still allowing private sector to earn a reasonable return on their investment. So likewise, the likes of new technology companies like Uber and likewise the other technology companies that presented today, and some partnerships between World Bank and other vehicle companies involved in technology development, we see the future of transportation essentially requiring technology's role. And in terms of efficiency and effectivity, we can't do away without technology coming into play. And clearly, governments should be open enough to adjust and adopt as not as quickly as technology would come in, but at least slowly catch up as things evolve as a fast pace of technologies coming in.
George? Okay. Any more questions? Or comment from the ministers? Yes, ma'am.
I think everyone's just eager to change clothes and hit the beach.
I'm Irene Sino Cruz, writing for Philippine Daily Inquirer, Visayas Bureau. May we know which, on the inclusive mobility, which aspects of inclusive mobility could be implemented doable immediately on short term, and which need to be hashed first before it can be implemented?
Actually, some economies already have them in place, much more advanced than probably comparing to what we have in the Philippines. Thus, all these APEC meetings are also an opportunity for knowledge sharing and best practices, such that no economy need to reinvent the wheel, but merely adopt what has been proven effective in other economies. So clearly we've seen some policies that have catered to the needs of the disabled so as to make them competitive and realize their own potentials. Similarly, same policies for accessibility and mobility for women, children, and the elderly. So clearly, some of these are on board with other economies. What is important here is to further institutionalize this and allow other economies who have not adopted to eventually adopt such policies within their transportation systems.
Okay.
For the Philippines, sir, what steps will you be taking to adopt the best practices that discussed today?
Well, clearly, we're playing catch up in all our mass transit systems. We have LR light rail online. We have bus rapid transit systems online. We are conducting a jeepney reform program, a taxi reform program, and a bus reform program. What is important here is to be mindful to keep inclusivity as part of your plans. The tendency for some is to forget about those who are not as privileged or not have the same accessibility. So it is important that it is institutionalized in our plans, and we are doing the same for the Philippines. If you were here yesterday, the Shoe Mart SM showed one of their buses that will be part of the augmentation to do Cebu BRT. And clearly, the technology in that bus has been around for other advanced economies, but for the Philippines is now being made available to allow easy access for disabled persons.
Okay. The lady first.
Good evening. I'm Chrissy De La Paz from Rappler. What are the commitments of the Philippines and other APEC economies regarding the Inclusive Mobility Initiative? Also, how do you measure the progress once the framework is there already? Thank you.
Well, as described, it is the number one component in the joint ministerial meeting. It was unanimously adopted by all the economies. And we foresee that it is going to be adopted as well when the economic leaders would sit down and finally decide on the next year or a couple of years of APEC. Clearly, the theme for today, driving economic growth through inclusive mobility and sustainable transportation system, is consistently, as said by Dr. Ballard, with the theme for our economic leaders. So our endorsement of this brings a commitment for all economies that such initiatives shall be pursued and eventually institutionalized in our economies.
Thank you. We'll have our last question.
To Secretary Abaya. Sir, can you highlight the role of the private sector in achieving our goals here in the transport sector?
Well, private sector is really important. We've learned a lot from that dynamic discussion this morning. We've had a dialogue with the CEOs. In that way, governments get to hear private sector. What do they expect from government? Likewise, government had the opportunity to likewise explain where government was coming from. So that was a very productive discussion this morning. Likewise, we've discussed a lot about intelligent transport systems and disruptive technologies. As we know, most of these systems are developed and nurtured in collaboration with academia and private companies. Government is usually not in a position to do everything in terms of innovation. Thus, private sector role is very important in innovation. They test the market, they invest in it, and actually put that balance between a successful innovation or investment and the risk of failure. So that is what private sector brings in developing more efficient transportation systems. Likewise, there was a discussion on public-private partnerships projects this morning. And indeed, most of the economies, advanced or developing, still see the role of PPPs as we catch up on transportation investment for each economy.
Before we end, we'd like to give the floor to His Excellency from New Zealand.
Thank you very much. Can I just say, as a minister from another country, organising one of these events is not easy, and in front of what I understand would be primarily Philippines media, can I say what an excellent host the Philippines has been. It's not easy, as I say, but it's been seamlessly organised. Ministers, dignitaries and officials from around the Asia Pacific have been treated to a very efficient but also friendly service while here. Can I also just record what an excellent job Senator Joseph Abaya has done shepherding us through the various tasks in, I think, a very good humoured way. This has been an excellent opportunity for ministers and senior officials to frankly exchange information, have bilateral meetings to learn from each other and get experiences from around the Asia Pacific. I think it's, for example, for New Zealand, given us a chance to push some liberalisation agendas that we've had with a variety of countries, but also to be inspired about what is happening and what the future potentially holds in areas such as intelligent transport systems, whether that's in autonomous vehicles and the digitisation of information, whether it's in more sustainable modes of transport with electric vehicles and other things that are coming at us, or whether it's in new mobilities and the sharing economy, hearing from Uber and some of the things that are going on there that could be quite transformative for the transport sector. So I think it's been a very good dialogue, and once again, can I just record, and I'm sure other dignitaries would agree, the appreciation we have for the excellent organisation by the host country, the Philippines.
I just remind media that if you're interested in some of these very interesting things we've been talking about and some specific examples of inclusive technologies in transport particularly, do go into the website where you'll get the papers that were presented to the transport ministers. There's a lot of material in there.
With the permission of the chair, we'll now formally close. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank you for coming to the joint press conference, and we'd like to thank the ministers for joining the press conference. Thank you and good night.